Would you walk with me in the light? As your body breaks, would you close your eyes? Would you wait and see? Would you walk with me in the kingdom high? 'Cause we run, we fall in the sand, and we drag our feet through the bitter land, and we wait outside for the sun to hide in our small hands. 'Cause it's the way I see, it's the air I breathe, it's the word I call to the sky, it's the things you cry on the street at night, it's the look I see in your eyes. Oh, 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 As they hold you down, trying to shield, little minds can't know what their heart feels. Sing a freedom song, but it won't be long till the hurt heals. 'Cause it's the way I see, it's the air I breathe, it's the word I call to the sky, it's the things you cry on the street at night, it's the look I see in your eyes. Oh, 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 walk with me, 'cause I see the light. No, I won't hide, 'cause I'm free tonight. Walk with me, 'cause I see the light. I am free, 'cause I see close your eyes? Would you close your eyes? Would you close your eyes?
Thank you. I don't know. After what Greer said, boy, is that enough of a talk about I have a dream? Thank you, Greer. That was amazing. Yeah. So I'm Sharon Ramey, and I'm really, really delighted to be here today. And I guess my first question to you is, do any of you ever complain? I mean, we're always taught in this movement not to complain, you know, not to bitch about things. Can I say bitch? No. So not to complain about things. And yet I have a friend, Kelly LaRue, who says that within every complaint is the seed of an intention. So if you're complaining, if you find yourself getting up in the morning, you're like, oh my gosh, I just don't feel so good today. You know that you can flip that and create an intention for feeling good. If you're sitting down with your friends over coffee and you're saying, oh my gosh, I just don't know how I'm going to get the money to pay the rent this month, you know, right in there, in that complaint, is the seed of, oh, wow, I could have had a V8. I could have had an intention to have a prosperous year, easily. So do you see how within every complaint, there is the seed of an intention? Now, that's really well and good, and I hope you remember that for your own life, that you can either be victims or dreamers. But what I'd like to talk about today is the global situation, something beyond yourself. Okay, we've got the individualized dreams covered, but what about the global dreams? That place where we can play in collective consciousness, where we can know together something magnificent, a magnificent dream for all of us, for everybody, everywhere. That's what I want to talk about. Now, have you ever heard anybody complain about stuff going on in the world? Any terrorism in the Middle East, any violence in our own country, any lack of education opportunities? How about lack of abundance for all? So if you're like me, then maybe you just dab a little bit in the area of global complaints. Because we all know that it really is, I mean, I might be able to do something about my own life, but it feels like an impossible dream to do something big about the world problems, right? I mean, I'm only one person. How can I affect anything in the Middle East? Anybody been there besides me? And yet, what I know is that within those complaints, there is that divine call that says every great change has started with a complaint. Take this complaint and create a dream. Create a dream that could be helpful for the world. Now, has this ever been done before? Oh, yeah. I mean, let's go back and talk about biblical times. You know, Moses, for example, he saw that all this horrible stuff was happening to his people, to his Jewish compadres, right? And after he killed an Egyptian at his first attempt to solve that problem, he quickly ran away into the hills and basically hid until God called him forth. God called him forth and says, go and save my people. Something's wrong here. We need a dream. You look forward to Jesus. I mean, Jesus, there are many, many stories about how Jesus saw suffering in the world, and he was committed to the freedom from that. Something's wrong here. Let's get a dream. Let's go fast forward to our founding fathers. I mean, did they have a complaint against England? This is yes. Okay. Did they have a complaint against England for all the tyranny that was going on at that time? Yeah. Did they have a complaint against England for not having any representation, even though these people were making rules and laws for them? Yeah, that was just wrong. That was just wrong. And somebody stood up in the midst of being persecuted and told that they would lose their lives and their families would lose their lives. These people stood up and said, we're going to take a stand. We're going to have a dream of governing ourselves. Then what about the suffragettes who said, well, if you can take a stand for all men are created equal and they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, what about women? And so somebody stood up and created the dream for women's voting rights. And then somebody stood up and said, well, if there's a dream for all men to be created equal and women can vote and stuff, what about children being free from having to go to work in the factories and out on the farms and being able to get an education? And somebody had a dream. Fast forward again to Martin Luther King, not that long ago. Martin Luther King, who heard the words, all men are created equal and they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, and he heard the words of Lincoln that actually freed the slaves from legal bondage, legal slavery. He freed them, and yet Martin Luther King had even a bigger dream. He said, no, we're not just free of being owned by somebody else. We want to be free to actually live out that creed of all men are created equal. So do you see, from every global complaint, there is a dream. Even sweet Malala, that sweet young Pakistani woman who's 14 years old or something, who got shot because she dared to have a dream that Pakistani women and all women and children should be able to have an education. She had a dream. Now, sometimes we think, I can't dream that big because it's impossible. I don't know how to make it happen. But yet, I think that we need to just rest in the idea of impossibility. Now, I know you're all saying, what do you mean? That's not very Center for Spiritual Living-ish. But what I'm saying about this is, just track with me. Let's go back to the forefathers of our country, and they had a dream for freedom in this country. Freedom from England, from England making laws for them and terrorizing them. They had a dream that all men are created equal, and it was this big a dream. Well, freedom is a quality of God, and it cannot be restrained. So once the Revolutionary War was over and that dream was achieved, the idea of freedom moved out. And now it included the idea of slavery, of Lincoln saying, wait a minute, if all men are created equal, then why do we have slaves? And the Emancipation Proclamation happened. And then it moved out, and women are saying, wait a minute, if that idea of freedom includes men and slaves, what about women? And then what about children? And then what about equal rights for equal marriage rights? What about the incredible expansion of that idea of freedom that causes the dream of freedom to feel like it's impossible, feel like we're never reaching it, but we are. With every one of those things that we achieved, there was an expansion of freedom. Does it still feel like we are not living all men are created equal? Yes, but it's a bigger idea now of freedom that we're trying to get. So, can we just be okay with the dream being impossible? Can we just sit in the mystery of that, in the uncomfortableness of that, and say, okay? Okay. So here's the thing. Now, sometimes when we think something is impossible, when we think a dream is impossible, then we want to do a couple of things. We want to either dumb it down so that it's nice and possible so that we can be successful, right? I mean, I've done that. The other thing we like to do is just throw it away completely. But I'm asking you to do two different things. I'm asking you, in the midst of being uncomfortable, to just hold that dream as possible. And a little later, we're going to write some dream cards where you get to actually write out a dream. And you're going to look at it and you're going to say, oh my God, how's that possible? And how can I do it? I'm asking you to just hold it. That, as Greer said, God is working for you too. You're not doing this alone. So just hold it in its impossibility gently. Can you do that? Okay, and the second thing you're going to do is you're going to make a contribution to that dream. Kathy Ann has been talking for the last few weeks about making a contribution, and you're going to make a contribution. Well, what does that look like? Oh, it might look like sending a check to the cause that you really want to promote, okay? Maybe there's something that has to do with educating women and children, or you want to support the doing away of homelessness or something. So you might write a check. Or how else could you contribute? You might actually go down and volunteer somewhere, right? There's a lot of things you could do. Now, when Martin Luther King was doing his thing, was he contributing to the world? Did he do anything to actually contribute? Did he do anything? Okay, so he talked to leaders of the nation. He talked to civic leaders. He talked to leaders of the black community. He talked to so many people, and he garnered support, right? That was one thing. He contributed, right? Okay, the second thing is he was a great orator. He always showed up when the time was right to lift people up. He contributed. We get to look at Martin Luther King and we can see clearly that he contributed. Now we can also probably see that those people that showed up at his marches contributed, right? I mean, some of them came a really long way on buses and stuff with very little to eat, came a long way in order to participate in those marches, right? Did they contribute? Yeah, they contribute. But what about grandma that stayed home to watch the kids so that the mother and father could go get on the bus and go to the march? Did grandma contribute? What about the bus drivers that spent all those nights driving all those people up to the marches? What about the restaurant owners back in Alabama who said, come on over and grab a bunch of food so you've got food to eat on the trip? Do you see how all of them contributed? They all held the dream. They all did their little part. That's all I'm asking you to do. Hold the dream and recognize that everything you're doing is a part of the dream. Now, contribution in my mind is the way you make the impossible possible. Let me give you another example about contribution. I know you guys remember back in the Middle Ages, right? But back in the Middle Ages, let's say 12th century or so, there were a lot of cathedrals being built around Europe, correct? I mean, you guys all studied history, lots of cathedrals being built. And one of the qualities of those cathedrals is oftentimes they took a really long time. Some of them I've seen quotes where some of them took like 400 and 500 years to actually complete one cathedral. So this archbishop, and the other thing I'm going to say is the person who came up with that original dream of the cathedral, was he alive to see the magnificence of it? No. Did that keep him from holding the dream? No. So anyway, a story I heard one time is about this archbishop who decided to come by and, kind of cheer all the workers on, just look at everybody in the construction area and, kind of give them some encouragement. So he goes up to one guy who's sitting there and pounding a rock and with a hammer. He says, what are you doing? He says, I'm trying to make the sides of this square so that it fits perfectly. And he goes, oh, that's very good, very good. He goes up to the next guy who's mixing a big pot of something. He said, well, what are you doing there? And he says, well, I'm mixing the mortar so that the rocks will, all the bricks and stuff will stay together. Ah, that's very good, very good. And then he went up and he saw this, probably a kid of about 16, 18 years old. And he knew from what the kid was doing that he was working on a pillar that was going to be way in the back of the cathedral. And that the part that the kid was working on was actually probably not even going to face out in the cathedral. So he thought, wow, it's very possible that whatever this kid is doing is not even going to be seen by most people. So he went up to the kid anyway, and he says, son, what is that you're working on? And he could see that the kid was carving like a flower motif on marble. He says, what's that you're working on? And the kid looked up, from being totally engrossed, looked up with his eyes shining and says, I'm building a cathedral. That's how I'm inviting you to look at everything you do. I'm inviting you to look at everything you do. Could you say that just showing up at service here today was in support of a higher dream? Yeah. Yeah. So just look at everything you do and ask yourself, is that in support of a higher dream? So now we are going to create a dream. So I'm going to give you some parameters first for creating a dream. Does everybody have a dream card? If you don't have a dream card or a pen, raise your hand. We have dream card distributors. Okay, so the first quality of a dream is get big. Get outside yourself. Make your dream something that not only you want for yourself, but you want for the world. If you don't want it for everybody, then it's not a big enough dream. You got that? So what Martin Luther King said in his famous speech, he said, our freedom is bound to the freedom of all. Do you see how it wasn't just freedom for his people? It was freedom for all that he was going for. The second thing, so the first thing is to get big with your dream. The second thing is to get graphic with it. Paint a picture with your words. Martin Luther King said just about, for example, the part about being nonviolent, he says, we are going to majestical heights to meet physical force with soul force. Do you see how he's creating a big dream, a graphic dream? He says, I have a dream that the sons of slave owners and the sons of former slave owners and the sons of former slaves will sit down together in brotherhood. Do you see how that's a picture? It's a graphic picture of something big. Malala, sweet Malala, she said, as far as being graphic, she says, I don't want revenge against the Taliban. I just want education for the sons and the daughters of the Taliban. So you're going to get big with your dream. It's going to hit everyone. You're going to make pictures, make a big description. And then finally, see the promised land. Martin Luther King said, let freedom ring. From every part of this country, we'll join together, black and white, to sing free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last. Not free at last, thank God Almighty, we will someday be free at last. But thank God we're free at last. So paint it as though you can see the picture as happening now. Okay? You got those? So we're going to play a 1-minute clip. It's kind of fuzzy because it's just kind of fuzzy. So let your imaginations just take what you need to take from this film clip of Martin Luther King so that you can create your own dream.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed.
I have a dream. So you are all invited to write down your dreams right now. Take a moment while Xolie plays and just write. Get big. Get graphic. See the promised land. And so knowing that you can complete these cards later if you haven't completed them now, I just invite you to look at them for a moment and resolve to take them home, put them up on your mirror, stick them up on your mirror in your bathroom, and look at them daily and ask, how can I contribute today to this dream? What small thing can I do today to contribute? And if that little impossibility head rears its ugly little face again that says, you can't do this, then I want you to remember a couple of things. Number one, again, you don't have to do it alone. You got God, and a big dream magnetizes people. Number two, don't worry about success. Don't worry about success or failure. Mother Teresa was asked by a man one day. He came up to the river where she was washing someone's sores, and he said, you know, you're helping this one person here. And you might be able to help 20 people today. But what about the millions in this country that you're not helping? The millions in this country that are suffering and dying every day. Well, that could make you feel like a failure, couldn't it? And he asked her that. He says, don't you feel like a failure? And she looked at him and said, God didn't call me to be successful. God called me to be faithful. So your job is to go forth and be faithful. And then lastly, like the cathedral, this dream, if it's big enough, may not be completed in your lifetime. Look at Martin Luther King. Do you know what he said the night before he was assassinated? The night before he was assassinated. He said, I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want to let you know tonight that we as a people will get there. So finally, in summary, I just invite you to hold that dream as we go into the final prayer, which is going to be a song sung by my sister Sheila and a slide presentation. I invite you to hold that dream next to your heart. I invite you to consistently, as you look at the pictures and listen to the words, continue to ask yourself, what am I called to do? And let yourself be lifted, for Spirit is lifting you. Let yourself be lifted into becoming a bold, powerful, confident, and courageous contributor to your impossible dream.
To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go, to right the unrightable wrong, to love pure and chaste from afar, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable the star. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to go into hell with a heavenly cause. And I know if I'll only be true to this glorious quest, that my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest. And the world will be better for this, that one man scorned